Hi, YouTube.
Oh,
I'm a little bit of a dumbass, so pretty much to explain what happened, I recorded a bunch of videos with me and my buddy talking, and I explained what all this is about. No, I'm not going to be a Minecraft YouTuber or something like that. All I wanted to
he
do.
is.
Shut up. Pretty much what I wanted to do is have a series where it don't have to be Minecraft, it can be multiple different games. We just want to use Minecraft for the first time because that's the only game we really had together at the moment. What we want to do is we want to just pretty much talk about things that we find interesting and we can talk about and kind of debate each other and stuff like that. And just pretty much have a game in the background that interests people. The topics we were talking about, we were on survival, but we'll get back to that one. The one that we're pretty much in the middle of talking about until I realize that I'm a dipshit is pretty much why scary games or horror games lose their feel the longer the series goes on. And what would you say, honestly, Clay?
For why they lose it.
Yeah.
I think it's escalation. I think that game developers choose to escalate the more action-packed version of the game instead of escalating the horror aspect, because I think escalating horror is almost impossible to continuously escalate what horror is, or what the fundamental of it would be, is impossible in a sense of like you're just creating new horror instead of actually escalating the existence of horror. Well, it's super easy to escalate action, or
Yeah.
the preconceived dangers. And I think that's why you get situations like that where a game like Resident Evil goes from being this horror-filled crawl of a mansion, survival zombie game, into you punching a boulder into lava.
Yeah. I understand what where you're coming from, because honestly, one of the big things that you just talked about, and I definitely do really agree with, is when it comes to scary games, I don't see a lot of scary games except a couple that I can name off the top of my head that really do that fear factor ability amazing. And honestly, those to me would have to be, if you had to choose, would be like Outlast, because that's all they dedicate
Oh
themselves
yeah.
to is horror. But like as you said, Resident Evil and stuff like that, they go from horror to action. And I understand that action games sell more than horror because honestly, not a lot of people like to play horror games because they're fucking terrifying at times. You have heart attacks and shit.
Well, I think it's specifically like for Outlast. I think it's, to me personally, I don't like it because I think it's boring to play. Like, it's scary, but it's the same as watching like a horror movie to me. Its gameplay is very mid. Like, you're not doing anything for most of the game besides running. And in that case, you're just really playing walking simulator with like a constant threat.
Yeah, I think honestly, if I had to, motherfucker, it's nighttime again. Where you at?
I was trying to. I thought I found a cave. I did not. It was just a hole.
Building. But pretty much to go back on the topic that we were
Dangerous.
talking about. I think a game that done it very well, like if you said had to do like a mixture of action plus horror, would have to be Alien Isolation. And I think it's good that they did not make another one. Because honestly, I don't know if you could recreate how that game felt. Because it was terrifying having
True.
something that would insta-kill you, and you had nothing to kill it, but just to deter it. It didn't
I
matter.
feel like that's where get good gameplay and good horror sense come from. I think having the ability to kill, especially when it's one monster, having the ability to kill the one monster comes like where the monster is no longer scary. But if you
Yeah.
can only deter it, then I think you keep the horror aspect.
Yeah.
What were you saying? Sorry, I cut you off.
But no, I definitely do agree with that. That's like one of my big points that I definitely have with the game is I don't think in a scary game you should be able to kill the actual creature that's chasing after you. And I think after a while, you knowing what the creature is does 100% take away from some of the scary aspects.
Yeah. No,
Because
I agree.
I think the human imagination has a lot more towards the fear factor than the actual game itself. Because I don't know a lot of games that can bring up the fear of it than most of the unknown. Because if you want to talk about like straight up unknown when it comes to video games, I think everybody who was born in, I guess the early 2000s can remember the first Call of Duty World at War when they had the first Nazi zombies. No one knew that was a full thing, and they didn't know what it really was because at that time there wasn't a lot of zombie games out there like that, and it was fucking terrifying.
Especially because it kind of just drops you in. You go from playing campaign to all of a sudden being on a plane, it crashing, you running to a building, and then boom, fucking iconic sound effect.
Yeah.
Iconic room, like. It's all just... But I think that adds to it, too, is for a horror game like that to be huge, like for you to have the horror feel, it has to be atmosphere. I think the atmosphere has so much to do with the aspect of horror.
Yes.
But
that is 100% true.
I think that's the same reason why a game like, or the idea like the Backrooms have become such... like influencers in the horror space, because the actual monsters are goofy.
Yeah,
like, they just look goofy. They're not scary by like anybody's imagination, but the feel of what is going on, that's horror. Like that's truly like, okay, this atmosphere, the dim lights, the yellow stained carpet, all that adds so much more to it.
I understand what you mean, and I think I have a good one to go off of as well that I think you'll agree with me or disagree. It's up, it's really up to you. God damn, this stupid skeleton's fucking me up. Sorry, I'm trying to fight a skeleton right now. He's whipping my ass. Damn, that motherfucker.
Oh, he built different.
A cracked shot. He don't miss. There's two of them. I'll fucking die.
He got aimbot, bro. Just live.
One honest to God game that what was my exact words I said before? God damn. That kind of threw me for a loop.
I couldn't tell you.
Fucking ADHD brain too. We were just talking about how like the Call of Duty series and stuff like that. We were talking about
atmosphere. Call of Duty.
Yes. Yeah. A game that done atmosphere phenomenally, and I still to this day think that there is not a game that's topped the atmosphere of it. I think Dead Space has been one of the most like perfect games when it comes to atmosphere and horror.
I think Dead Space is, but I think it's only the first half of Dead Space. Because I think they fail to the same thing that I was talking about earlier, where they escalate to the point where you go from these monsters that you had no idea existed or anything about, that, could kill you in one hit, to all of a sudden mowing down hundreds of them in hallways and just moving forward like it meant nothing. And by the time you get to like Dead Space 3, that's really when you're like, I mean, you're kind of just bullying these creatures at this point, murdering them in droves.
Yeah, I understand your thought,
But I do agree, Dead Space, the first one, first opening scene, scared the shit out of me when I was young, still scares the shit out of me.
Oh, yeah.
That's a horrifying scene. Like, they did it really well.
And I don't know a game that's really captured it as well, to that point where it gives you that fucking heart attack feeling of, oh my fucking god. And like the music in that game was phenomenal to make it as eerie and creepy as everything could be. Because at the end of the day, if it didn't have the music that it had, I honestly don't think it would have been as scary. I think it would just felt like another,
generic.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally get that. But that's part of it's just atmosphere. Like, games, I think a good horror game lives and dies on whether or not you can have the person playing it feel the environment, like
Yeah.
feel what it's that environment invokes, and like what it would be like standing in it.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the thing. Is like standing in, once again, the back rooms is like my best example of this, of a game that has such a familiar, feeling to it. Everybody, for some reason, everybody can remember like a room being that yellow light carpet that smells moldy-ish, this like ugly wallpaper. It's like a common memory with everybody, you know?
Yeah.
So you've been in some waiting room or something like that when you were a kid, and that's just what the room was like, and that's what this game is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has such a familiar feel, and I think that's the reason that it gives off this horror feel.
Yeah, I do agree. I think another good example of a game that's definitely was super fearful, and I think they pretty much mulched the game. And if you go back to the old one, I still think it induces a lot of fear. Is the old Slender Man game? It was such a basic ass game. It was literally you are just walking and picking pages up, and something was following you. But it was
scavenger hunt
so
on extreme mode, bro.
It was so fucking gut wrenching when something chased after you and you just fucking couldn't do anything.
I think like the most horrifying thing is when you look off in the distance and you just notice the fucker looking at you, but you know he's standing right there.
Yeah, and I think that it was such a weird feeling because how do you get that in a game and be able to repeat it, make multiple versions of that? Because I don't think it's possible. I think honestly, when it comes to good horror games, I think it needs to be. It sounds all like stupid, but one-offs. I think one-offs are great because it attaches to that. I guess what is it? It attaches to that fear, and it actually scares the crap out of you because you don't know it. But once you know what's going on, you start to get comfortable and complacent with it. But I still feel like if you hopped into some of these certain games, they just had it on point, and I don't know what it was that actually made it on that much of a point. If that makes sense.
See, I agree. I agree that like most horror games probably should be one-offs.
Yeah.
But I think truly a horror game can do sequels, but it just can't. If it's going to do a sequel, the game has to learn that it's sometimes okay to be stagnant. You don't have to make a zombie game and zombies be really horrifying and be actually scary in it and being a menace, and then like immediately give the player a flamethrower.
Yeah.
Like it's fine. The player can use the 9mm with limited ammo that you gave them. You don't have to escalate the amount of damage the player gives.
Mm-hmm.
But you can escalate by like the environment that you're gonna put the player in.
Yeah.
Like if the environment's going to change suddenly, or if the type of zombies going after them, if they're different in some way. I think these are the correct ways to go about like for a good zombie specific horror game.
Yeah. Because I'll admit, like, whenever you hopped into some games, it was terrifying at first, but the longer you played it, that feeling went away because they gave you the strength to fight back. And
I don't even think it's like the strength to fight back. It's the strength to over-dominate that really just ruins it. Because, like, the ability to fight back would be like, and once again, like, it's just a 9mm with, like, enough ammunition to kill, like a handful of zombies in an area. But the times they give you, like, a minigun, and then you're just mulching them with, like, infinite ammo,
mm-hmm.
At that point, you're really not even scared of these
You're just playing
creatures.
Doomslayer.
Like, yeah, you're just playing Doomslayer. You're just going to absolutely mollywop everything in front of you.
Mm-hmm. But like, as you said in the previous thing that we were doing, when I talked about Outlast, you talked about how the game felt like a walking simulator because it didn't have a way to actually fight back. Do you think that it's sitting there and having a system where it can't fight back makes it scarier, or do you think it makes it where it's more, like, I guess, tedious and boring?
So I think Outlast is kind of not even unique because a lot of horror games fall on this trope. But so let's compare it to Slender Man. Slender Man, while it is legitimately a walking simulator, I don't see it the same way because to me it has engaging gameplay. You're actively looking for something all the time. You're actively going for something. Or go for like something like Amnesia, where it's like a puzzle solving game with these horror aspects. And like these are the key gameplay points of it. When I played Outlast, although granted I did not make it super far in that game, right? Because I kind of just stopped playing it. The entire time, I was just exploring a facility, and I had nothing else to do. The game gave me no objectives, nothing to really be finding, nothing to be actively doing in the game, and no mechanics to be, moving the plot along in my own like accord. Besides, walk to point A, then walk to point B. And that's in my opinion why that game doesn't have like a super interesting mechanic to it. Because it's not fun to walk around constantly. It's more fun to actually interact with the world.
Yeah. So let me ask this then, because I think you might have. I want to kind of hear your opinion on this because I think I'm really curious just to hear it honestly. What about PT? It just a game that was a one-off. And it wasn't even a full game. It was just a demo. Yes. It was just a demo, but turned out to scare the shit out of everyone.
So that in an instance, once again, is a situation where a company had probably gold sitting in their pocket and they let it slip. Its gameplay didn't matter because of how horrifying the game is. Once again, an interactive movie would still be played.
Yeah.
Like, people would still, and there's a lot of people who likes that sort of thing.
Yeah, like Until Dawn series.
Yeah. I would prefer watching somebody play it than actually play it myself.
Yeah.
More than likely. Because that sort of thing that's just... They did it well. They did it so well that it's honestly amazing how they fumbled the bag and not actually doing it.
Because they had gold in their hands and they just never did anything with it.
There's not a single reason that was not made besides like they absolutely just corporate doesn't understand what a player base would want.
Yeah.
Because like I don't know the full story behind why it was made, but if I'm not mistaken, it's something along the lines of like they didn't think it would sell at the time, which is absurd.
God, it was so good.
Because
it honestly was so terrifyingly scary.
I mean, it was, but let's like so another one, which like. This goes against what I was saying, because there's a lot of games after I'm trying to think about it. Maybe it's just Outlast that I just don't find engaging.
You're just like, fuck that game.
Yeah, like maybe it's just that one, because there's another game I played a good bit of it. I did not finish it. I don't finish many games. But I did play a good bit of it, and it's genuinely was scary, but it was Layers of Fear. Layers of Fear, genuinely a scary game. But I don't even know why, because like, once again, atmosphere killed it. That game had horrifying atmosphere. And the actual like psychic trip that it goes. I feel like that's the thing too, is that a lot of really good horror I think comes from like the psychic trip that you go through your own character's mental health.
Yeah.
When it's internal horror, I think that's sometimes the best type of horror.
I think honestly, when it comes to me thinking about something that's, it has to be atmosphere to me that makes any scary game scary. Atmosphere can make a normal game terrifying. Like if you change the atmosphere of this game, like Minecraft, you can make the game fucking terrifying.
Easily.
But like,
RTX turned on, horrifying.
But it's weird that after a while of like horror game making multiple versions of it, I don't know if it's just because it gets stale, or if it just they can't capture that same atmosphere.
Now, this is the question though. Is like, because I think we both came to our answers on it. I think that it's just due to escalation, and I think escalating horror is really impossible to do. But after I think about it, there has been some like games that has like good sequels, and I think this is where it comes from. I think horror that is like internal to the character is always more horrifying than horror that is external to the character. And I think when you escalate these two types of horrors, the one that's internal to a character escalates better. You can get better like sequels than the horror that's external to a character. Because after I think about it, Layers of Fear had a sequel. Its sequel is really good. It's really horrifying. I did not play it. I had seen it on YouTube and watched it, and it was really good. It's a really good sequel, and it's real still. It keeps that scary feel to it the entire time, and I think that has to do with the fact that there isn't an external threat for them for you to get accustomed to and no longer be afraid of. It's still an internal bit. It's internal, like in the mind of the character, and that entire thing is what makes it horrifying.
Yeah, it might be because there's just something about it whenever you start to play a horror game with that initial feel.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I honestly think when it comes to horror games, in my opinion, there's been some really good horror games that went back to their roots, but I think for the longest time, a lot of the companies that were making horror games just got really money hungry and just didn't give a shit about what they'd done in the beginning.
Yeah, it's really hard to force loot boxes in a horror game. Like it just is. Like you cannot put loot boxes in like fucking I'm trying to think of one off the top of Amnesia. I like imagine Amnesia, in order to open up this door, open up 7 loot boxes. Like, no, you're not gonna be able to. And I feel like that's part of the reason you don't see AAA games making horror games.
Yeah, it's because they just don't get their money out of it.
They don't. You don't get nowhere near as much money out of it, even if it's like a wildly successful one. So maybe that's why PTB wasn't made, because at the end of the day, even if it was to sell well, there's no extra content you can do for it. Maybe besides DLC that you could get. Like, there's no microtransactions. People aren't gonna put skins on their characters. Like, that's not what the game's about. So I think that's, at the end of the day, probably why AAA doesn't make horror games, and it's being carried only by
the indies,
the indie genre, which I'm fine with, but also at the same time, that does suck. I do think that AAA could make
some really amazing, scary games.
Yeah, with just the sheer amount of teamwork that they could pull off, like if they're humongous teams, I would love to see like a Bethesda full focus horror game. Yeah. Granted, if you're a developer of something, booster games probably look like horror games with the sheer amount of glitches. But without that being stated, I think that it would be entirely like horrifying to see, or be interesting to see what type of horror game they'd be able to put together. Yeah. Actually, hold on, didn't they made Prey, didn't they? If I think about it.
Yeah, and they did decent.
So I guess that's the type of horror game they put together.
Yeah. I don't think it was like Prey and stuff that was a terrible game.
But how horrifying was that game?
Not really. It got very actiony after a while. Or when I say action, it was just jump scare filled because it was pretty much like playing prop hunt.
That makes sense. Well, do you want to stay on the horror topic? I don't know if we're...
Well, I think it'd be...
force enough.
Yeah,
I mean, well, I'll put it this way. Is there any horror games coming out that has been, that you're hyped about?
Except from Sons of the Forest, I really don't think there's going to be one that I'm, like, amazingly hyped for that's going to be, like, groundbreaking for me.
Now, Sons of the Forest, that definitely is going to have more of a survival aspect to it, though, right?
Yes, but I think it's going to still have that horrifying aspect of, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean the creatures in it by themselves, like the body dysmorphia horror that exists. That is, yeah.
Yeah. But I think we'll have a good topic for next one. But I think I'm going to end this one right here. If y'all like this type of content, please leave a like. Leave comments telling us some topics that you think would be really interesting to watch. Because honestly, you know, we can talk about a lot of different topics. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.